Life is hard for many people. It's difficult to make ends meet, and no matter how much you try to save, the cost of living is sometimes too high. There are countries where this situation is more severe than in others. We are not talking about nations like Switzerland, which does have a very high cost of living, but also much higher salaries that can balance it out. But in Europe, there are several countries where the cost of living is so high that it is more than double the average salary. Today, we will discover the 10 European countries with the highest cost of living compared to salary, and we will also have some surprises. Welcome to this new video of Amazing Europe. Number 10, Malta. What greatly disadvantages Malta are the housing prices, both for renting and buying. Of course, there are worse situations in Europe, but they are quite disproportionate in relation to the salary. Rent prices vary widely, but a studio apartment in the city centre costs on average around €950 per month, €150 less outside the centre. It's not a low cost considering that the average net salary is just over €1,400 per month. Just think that a good salary for Malta would be €4,000. This country has become a destination for digital nomads and investors, and it offers job opportunities in the tourism and technology sectors. For this reason, many people have wanted to move there in recent years, which obviously drives up house prices. One thing that really needs to be focused on is increasing salaries. In fact, the total cost of living, taking into account not only rent but also all expenses, is 1.21 times higher than the average salary. Number 9, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Rent prices in Bosnia and Herzegovina are much more affordable compared to Malta, but the cost of living in other areas remains high. On average, a single person spends around €560, while a family of 4 spends €1,900. And these last two figures do not take into account housing costs. It's not a small amount, considering that the monthly salary does not reach €650 net. This means that even if both parents work, the family will struggle to make ends meet. To make a comparison, the cost of living in London excluding rent is just over double that of Sarajevo. But the salary of a Londoner is more than 4 times that of a resident of the Bosnian capital. Vegetables and food in general are not cheap, and the cost of clothing is also disproportionate to the salary. Overall, the cost of living in Bosnia and Herzegovina is 1.27 times higher than the average salary. Number 8, Greece. In some ways, the situation in Greece is the opposite of that in Bosnia. Here, rents are low, but the cost of living is decidedly high, always in relation to the salary. Of course, it varies greatly if one is in the city or in the countryside and can grow much of their own food. In fact, in the city, supermarket expenses are very high in Greece. Milk, rice, eggs, meat, and other foods can have prices similar to those in both Athens and London. But in Athens, the salary is more than 3 times lower than in the English capital. Everything changes when we look at rent and housing costs. There is no comparison to the United Kingdom, but a studio apartment in the city centre costs about half the average salary. If we add the average cost of living to the rent, we see that Greeks, on average, spend 1.4 times more than their monthly salary every month. Number 7, North Macedonia. The former president of Macedonia, Stevo Pendarovski, said that if he weren't the president, he would have already emigrated from Macedonia. This phrase sums up the difficulties of Macedonian citizens well. The cost of living in North Macedonia is the lowest among those seen so far, as are the rents. But the problem is that the salary is also the lowest of the countries seen so far. On average, a single person spends just over €500 per month, excluding accommodation. For a family of 4, expenses rise to about €1,700. These are unfeasible figures with an average salary of just €540. It's not hard to understand why emigration is very high. In the last 20 years, this nation has lost more than 9% of its citizens, and 58% of young people wish to leave their country. The president's salary is higher than that of the citizens, and this is certainly the reason why at least he hasn't emigrated. Number 6, Portugal. The situation in Portugal has changed significantly in recent years. The average salary has certainly increased and is currently around €1,000 net per month. However, expenses and housing costs have also risen significantly. Portugal is divided in two. On one side, there are the coastal areas and big cities like Lisbon and Porto. Here, tourism has certainly brought more wealth, but it has also profoundly changed the city landscape. Housing in Lisbon is very expensive, with prices unaffordable for many Portuguese. Much of the historic center of the Portuguese capital belongs to foreigners, such as the English and Chinese. The tourism boom has also significantly increased dining costs, which not all Portuguese can afford. On the other side, however, are the inland areas. These have not seen the improvements experienced by the cities and tourist areas. Property prices have increased here as well, but not to the same level as in the big cities. However, salaries are certainly lower. On average, the cost of living in Portugal is 1.55 times higher than the monthly net salary. Number 5, Montenegro. Housing counts for less in Montenegro than in Portugal, but grocery shopping in Montenegro is not the cheapest thing in the world, especially if you only earn €780 a month. This, in fact, is the average salary for a Montenegrin, insufficient to cover €600 in monthly expenses plus another €600 in rent. Even restaurant meals are not particularly affordable for Montenegrins, as an average meal costs around €15. But from some of the prices we've seen so far, we understand how Montenegro is ideal for an inexpensive vacation for those coming from wealthier countries. Here, the total vacation cost can be around €85 per day. For this reason, along with its natural and architectural beauty, the number of tourists in this country has doubled from 2011 to 2021. Of course, there was a sharp decline with the pandemic, but they are recovering quickly. Number 4, Belarus. There are far fewer tourists in Belarus than in Montenegro, but this is certainly not due to high prices. In fact, the cost of living in Belarus is lower than in Montenegro, but the problem lies in the salaries. The average salary in Minsk, the capital of Belarus, is €200 less than in the capital of Montenegro. For families, another issue is school fees, especially for private kindergartens. The monthly fee for these can amount to half the average salary in Belarus. For a family of 4, the average monthly expenses are €1,500, not including housing. For a single person, it's about €420 per month. Calculating all this, we see that the cost of living in Belarus is 1.57 times higher than the average salary. Number 3, Serbia and Kosovo. We group these two countries together because Kosovo is recognized by most European states, but not unanimously, and because the situation is quite similar. For completeness, we inform you that Kosovo is recognized as an independent state by 22 out of the 27 European Union members. Cyprus, Greece, Romania, Slovakia, and Spain have not officially recognized the country's independence. It is interesting to compare the two countries because they are quite different in terms of the cost of living. We are obviously talking about two very affordable countries to visit as tourists, and between the two, Kosovo has a significantly lower cost of living. While in Serbia, the monthly expenses, excluding housing, amount to almost €600 on average, in Kosovo, they are €470. Rent is also cheaper in Kosovo, as a one-bedroom apartment in the city centre costs €170 less in Kosovo than in Serbia. However, when it comes to salaries, there is no comparison. In Serbia, people earn 44% more than in Kosovo, creating the current situation in these two countries. Number 2, Moldova. In Moldova, the same pattern seen in many countries continues. The cost of living is always lower, but salaries are even lower. With an average net salary of €560, fewer and fewer Moldovans manage to make ends meet. The young people want to flee abroad, which has led this country to lose 40% of its population over the last 30 years. The UN predicts that by 2000, the population will decrease by another 38.6%, making Moldova one of the nations at risk of becoming significantly depopulated over time. Monthly expenses, even without considering housing, are already higher than the average salary. They amount to €580, to which one must then add the cost of housing. Renting a one-bedroom apartment in the city centre costs about €390 per month. A three-bedroom apartment in the city centre can cost about €700, while the monthly expenses for a family of 4 are around €1,900. These expenses are low compared to the majority of European countries, but it is really difficult to cope with these expenses with a salary like the Moldovan one. Before revealing number 1 and also taking a look at the transcontinental countries, if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to like, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell so you don't miss new videos. Thank you very much. Number 1. Ukraine. Even without considering the war, the situation in Ukraine is truly disastrous. Ukraine has some of the lowest salaries in all of Europe. We are talking about €350 net per month, less than the monthly expenses excluding housing. It is estimated that the average monthly expenses in Ukraine amount to about €390, to which one must then add any rent or house purchase costs. Rent in cities is more expensive in Kyiv than in Chisinau, the capital of Moldova. Even the cost of public transportation and cars is often higher than in Moldova. We are still talking about prices much lower than the European average, but paying for everything with €350 a month is a real challenge. It is no surprise that Ukrainians have one of the highest emigration rates in Europe, even before the war. In the 12 years preceding the conflict, Ukraine had lost more than 18% of its population. If things continue like this, it is estimated that it will lose more than 40% by 2000. And these estimates were made without considering the war, which will certainly worsen the situation. If on the left you can see the ranking we have seen so far, on the right you can see the same ranking but taking into account transcontinental countries. In these two columns, you can also see how many times the monthly expenses, including housing, are higher than the average salary. As you can see, in Ukraine the expenses amount to almost double the average salary, while in Armenia and Georgia they are about 2.5 times higher. If you found this video interesting, we recommend the one on European countries with the highest salaries. You can find it at the top right. That's all for this video. See you next time.